Welcome everyone, and we'll get started in just 1 second here. It is 5 minutes after the hour. So on behalf of the Centers for Medicare and Medicaid Services, the Administration for Community Living, and the Indian Health Service, I would like to welcome everyone to the Long-Term Services and Supports webinar series. My name is Sherry Gay, and I work for Kaufman and Associates. I'll be your moderator today. Today's webinar is titled Overview of CMS's LTSS TA Center. Before we begin, I would like to highlight the main features of your Zoom webinar interface. First, the presentation slides will appear in the main window, while the speaker will appear in the top corner. At the bottom of your screen is the menu bar. Here you will find the chat, raise hand, Q&A, and closed caption functions. Please use the chat box to report any technical issues you are experiencing. We will respond to these concerns as they come in. Next to the chat box is the raise hand feature. You're able to use this during the Q&A segment to let us know when you'd like to unmute your mic so you can ask a question. Another way you're able to submit a question is in the Q&A box itself, where you can leave your questions at any point during the webinar for the presenters to address during the Q&A segment at the end. Lastly, live captioning is available for today's broadcast. Simply click the CC icon to use this feature. Please be aware that today's webinar is being recorded and that the recording will be made available online in the near future on cms.gov. With that said, I would like to welcome everyone to today's webinar. Please note this webinar series is supported by a contract awarded by the Centers of Medicare and Medicaid Services. The opinions, findings, conclusions, and recommendations expressed in this webinar are those of the presenter and do not necessarily represent the official position or policies of the Department of Health and Human Services or the Centers for Medicare and Medicaid Services. I would like to introduce our presenter, Anna Whiting-Sorrell, a subject matter expert here at Kaufman and Associates. And now we're going to open in a good way. Jean Sorrell is an elder of the Confederated Salish and Kootenai tribes in northwestern Montana. He is a Vietnam veteran and continues to serve as a member of the Mission Valley Honor Guard. He was presented an Eagle Feather War Bonnet in traditional recognition in 2015. He is a husband, father, and papa to Esther and Jonathan.
Senor Kuke, Lemlem's Creator, Kulan Sutan, we give you this day, Grandfather Creator, to reach and touch each and every one of us. I know at a long times we have many problems in our lives. And Grandfather Creator, I just ask that you lift those problems and health issues from us today, to allow us this opportunity to meet each other and share our thoughts and our minds and the paths that we have taken, Grandfather. We give you thanks for those that have brought us here together today. We just lift up our hearts to you in a good way, Grandfather, to allow us this opportunity to share with the many individuals that we have this day. I pray that the Grandfather Creator reaches out and touches each one of your family and to help them wherever they need help, Grandfather. Leblebs, Kulansutin, Pesia, Shehoy. Have a great day. Love you all. Amen.
Thank you, Jean. That was beautiful. Next slide. So the webinar objectives today is to explain the intent of the LTSS Technical Assistance TA Center, review the TA Center's sections, explore resources available for planning and implementing an LTSS program, and highlight some of the TA Center's resources. With this, I'm going to go ahead and hand this over to Anna Whiting-Sorrell.
Well, good afternoon, everybody. I am so honored to be here and to have been invited to share information with you all on this webinar. I started working for Kaufman and Associates, who is celebrating this month 32 years of doing work in Indian country. Kaufman has been a key part of this TTA Center. The center has had a long-standing relationship with CMS and the Division of Tribal Affairs. And so we're really looking forward to really what we are seeing as a new year. For many people, the new year starts when kids go off to school and we start re-engaging in changing from the season of summer that's less structured to a much more structured fall season. So the Centers for Medicare and Medicaid Services has a division of tribal affairs. And within that, there's a number of programs that are provided. Today, we're going to focus on the long-term support services portion of the work that Kaufman does. We were visiting as getting ready, prepared for this workshop a few minutes ago before the webinar started. And we were having a conversation about how important it is for people to see themselves in work that's being done. And this website, the work that CMS does through the Division of Tribal Affairs, really is to connect Indigenous people to the wide range of resources that CMS has. And so if we go to the next slide, this CMS, this slide just shows the wide range of services that CMS and the Division of Tribal Affairs really has for Indigenous people. So there's information about the tribal consultation, about tribal calls and webinars, a great section on behavioral health. CMS has an advisory council, an advisory group of tribal leaders. It's called TTAG, and they get together and really hear. And CMS, the Division of Tribal Affairs, is hearing what tribal people want, what their needs are, and responding. CMS, has Medicare and Medicaid and CHIP, and those are all important programs to ensure that healthcare is delivered to Indian people. So I wanted to just go through and if you get a chance, we're going to steer you to the long-term support and services TA Center page. There's also a lot of other good resources that I hope you'll look at. So the next slide talks about long-term services and supports, and LTSS help make it possible for elders and people with disabilities to live in their home and in their communities. And I know that when time comes for people to really think about aging parents or aging grandparents, or something happens that we're blessed with someone that has counting on us to have because of a disability, and while we want to keep them in our homes as long as we can in their homes, or make sure they have the right supports, we also know that a time may come when they need to move to a center, and we want to make sure that those centers absolutely reflect the culture of our many tribal communities. So the next slide is, there. So what we are looking for in the TA Center, it's really has resources for tribal leaders, tribal health directors, and other key stakeholders that are involved in LTSS programs. It's important that people, and sometimes in our tribal communities, the support center, the centers may actually be provided by non-Indians, or and so we also want to make sure that they are thinking about and understanding how important it is that these centers reflect the culture, the tribes, the beliefs, the values of the clients that they have. And while we are focusing on Indigenous people, I hope that it opens their eyes to other people's culture that may be in their centers, and they would go and look to make sure that the centers are as welcoming as we hope they make them for Indigenous people. In the next slide, there are 7 major sections of the LTSS TA Center. And what we've tried to do in that center, what CMS has tried to do, is to really have a wide range of services available. And I have had the chance in the last few days to be reminded of how wonderful some of the information is that is contained on this website. So the resources are divided into 7 major sections. First it's about LTSS information. And then there's a map, an interactive map of the tribal, the IHS, the tribe and urban programs. And that map is so much fun. I was looking at it, and we'll go into a little more detail about it in a little bit here, but I'd really encourage you to get on that map. Examples of programs that are available, that are out there across Indian country, across the country, and also focus areas, webinars, and newsletters. So, and finally, a major issue that we know has a lot of concern and people looking for information in dementia. The URL is listed, and hopefully when we're off the webinar, or if you're multitasking and looking at it as we're going through it, you'll spend some time really digging into the different sections, the 7 major sections. And in the next slide, we go into more detail about the information that is contained on the website. It really has 2 key areas that are broken down. One is planning an LTSS program, and the other is implementing the program. And so what I found when I got on the website, it is really possible, with all of the information that is on this website, to get your program, to think about it, to really think about where you currently are at, and then think about and plan, where do you want to go? Where is it that you as a tribe or you as a program are thinking about? But, in the end, what is it that you want to achieve for long-term care? There are lots of resources to help you understand, how do you get there? So it's one thing to understand where we're at, and, and then really trying to vision where we want to go. And then it's important to figure out, how do we get there? We need long-term, plan steps, but then we also need some short-term steps about how do we get there. And this resource is really helpful. It's helpful for you to engage tribal leaders. It shows you program examples, models of other programs. One of the key areas that I know is needed is understanding and working with your state and federal resources. The states have a key role in CMS services, and many states, I think there are 32 states in which there are federally recognized tribes. Many of those states have worked hard to develop relationships with the tribes, and so reaching out and being able to get their guidance early on, especially when it comes to funding and financing, and that it's so important to reach out to those state services that really pertain to you in your particular area. Then there is a step-by-step program roadmap that helps you, just like I said, from going from, understanding what you're thinking about, where you are right now, how those services are currently being delivered, to creating a vision that would meet what it is that you would like to have in this area of long-term care. And then step by step, how do you get there? What do we need to do? The step-by-step planning. And then one part that I'd also like to emphasize is you need to understand that you have goals, objectives that are measurable, so that you arrived. So that while the vision's important and all of the planning steps are important, we also need to make sure that we have an idea about when are we successful. One of the things I find in my work world is that it's really hard to, we don't often share appreciation for how much work is really getting done, because we're always looking ahead, or we want more, we need more, the next grant is coming after at us, and we're just moving, and I think that's become more, that's become more apparent in this remote world, when so many of us are working remotely in our homes. And so finding times in different intervals to really stop and assess what we've done, what we've gotten done, and share appreciation for everybody that has come together to help. So the next slide is the map that shows the where programs are. If you're not aware, and the ITU is the Indian Health Service Tribal Urban acronym, and so it's used often in many places, and in my work I have found that while it is very familiar to me and many people use it, it's good to stop and just share what that is. So the IHS is the primary advocate of providing healthcare, the federal healthcare delivery system. Tribes have the opportunity to take on services that IHS previously had provided through Public Law 93-638, the Indian Self-Determination and Education Assistance Act. And so that's the T. And then the U are urban programs. There are 41 programs that Indian Health Service supports through a contract. And this map, what's great about this map is that if you click on your state or area, it's going to take you directly to see where those other programs are. That gives you a chance to, to reach out to other people that you may not have even known, or helps you find a network to build your own network to help you support as the work is being done across that you're doing locally. The LTSS roadmap is the next slide, and this is a 7-step roadmap process, and really reiterates the kind of those broad steps that I talked about earlier. The formal way to understand where you are right now is a needs assessment, and that's really to tell you what are the current needs out there, and it's a way in which you could go out, talk to your community members, maybe your elders, your culture committees, certainly your tribal leadership, and figure out what it is, what's going on right now in your community in a needs assessment. Based on that needs assessment, the next step in the roadmap is to figure out what are your goals and objectives. And what is it that you want to do? Are you thinking about creating a center? Are you looking at how do you get more resources into people's homes? What are the programs, what are the ways in which you could look to help people stay in their homes longer? What services are needed for the caregivers? One of the things I hope that the world is much more aware of right now is the importance of supporting caregivers. And while the person that is receiving the care is the prime, is who we put the focus on, caregivers are absolutely essential, and making sure that they're doing their own self-care and they're reaching out to people and they have the resources they need, and they're not forgotten, because they are so key to the work, to helping those individuals that are in need of these services. Next you can, think about, what are some of the models that are out there? And, you could go back to the roadmap and see what other programs are out there. You could reach out to your state office and see what they're doing. And, maybe there are ways that you can pick and choose, so that the model that you select in step 4 really meets your needs and is able to adapt to your needs, to your culture, to what's important to you. I live I'm enrolled at the Confederate Salish and Kootenai tribes in northwestern Montana, and we have 1.3 million acres and 7 major communities. And so the model that we would want to select would have to be one that could serve all of those communities. There are smaller communities, certainly in Indian country, and larger communities. So those, being able to really focus on what is your particular, what does your particular target population look like? What are all of the different locations, and planning that out and being sure that you select a model that plans that. The next after a model selected is really adapting it and making sure that it is culturally appropriate for with activities, with services, making sure you're able to get tribal staff trained and involved and engaged. And then comes implementation. And that's when we're just busy doing the work, getting the work done, and and then finally evaluation. And I love that this diagram is in a circular fashion, because if it was linear, you would think, oh, you do your needs assessment here and then you do your evaluation at the end. And we know that's not true. We know that there's not an end, that there is an ongoing planning process. It begins, with identifying, what is the need, but the needs will change over time. And so you're going to have to continually be thinking about your goals, making sure that the model is adaptable and you're planning to change as the needs change, and implementation. And I'm also a really big believer that evaluation doesn't come at the end, but really has to be thought out at, right up front. And that goes back to, what I was saying about, did we succeed? And so what would success look like? And what success looks like is really what you want to be sure is being evaluated. In the next slide, this website actually has profiles of tribal LTSS programs. And, so I would encourage you to get on the website and to look at their 5 different programs, very different in different parts of the country. And I just know that these examples could give you some really good insight as to what you want to think about as you begin planning, or if you have a program and you're at that stage about wanting to reevaluate, rethink about needs, the opportunities of success, to see successful programs and what they have done are available on this website. And so I'd encourage you to look at those as well. So, in addition to planning, the next slide shares the website about, just focus areas. And we really want, we want to be inclusive of different focus areas, because we know that programs are looking at different focus areas. And so you're going to see a wide range of different areas that, that are included in this section in the LTSS focus areas. There's some great information on traditional food, certainly ideas around hospice and palliative care. As I said earlier, there's a section on caregiver support and how we do, how important that is and ideas around it. Another focus area is long-term care, long-term support services and support for Native American veterans. And I always like to say that, we as Indigenous people have served in the military at a higher rate than any other group in this country. And that means that we have a very special responsibility to take care of our Native veterans as they return home from their service and as they age, and fully understanding that they come with a unique set of needs and also opportunities to work together, to support each other, and really making sure that we are honoring and respecting and engaging in their services. There's also a focus area for elder abuse prevention, and some ideas that are given around them, tribal nursing homes, and then dementia and other emerging issues that are out there to help you get information about. The next slide talks about webinars, and that's where we are today. So we try to do a webinar, or we are really faithful about doing a webinar each month, and in a pretty consistent fashion. I think it's like the fourth Wednesday of every month, except it varies a little bit, around Thanksgiving and Christmas, and sometimes we have something that comes up, but it's pretty clear that it's the fourth Wednesday of each month, and at the same time. So we're able to get the people to join, and you can count on it. One of the things that we're thinking about, as I said earlier, that, as we're in September and we're thinking about the next 12 months, are there some topics that we want to focus on during this next year? And so I'm going to ask you to put in the chat box any ideas that you may have about topics that are important to you. And we really want to focus them on, on Indigenous people and issues around Indian country that, that you think are weighing heavy on your heart. And, we won't be able to do all of them. I don't want to, as I promised the staff, I wouldn't overpromise so we'd underdeliver. But we're really, really interested in having feedback from all of you on topics that you're finding. Last year, we did a couple of webinars on the impact of COVID on long-term care services. And so, that was something that we knew was out there that we needed to address. So if in the chat box, I know Sherry's monitoring the chat box, and she will get those written down, and And as we're planning for the next few webinars, we'll try to see if we can include some of them. Also, in the next slide, we talk about the newsletter, and this newsletter is excellent. I mean, it has the most current information, and it's just really, really good information about current news, funding opportunities, different resources. It announces webinars and about events, and it's really, really designed for a wide range of people, from tribal leaders to health planners to all of you that are engaged in LTSS, to care providers, and I know that it also periodically has information on self-care for caregivers. Once again, such an important piece of the work that you're all doing. The next slide shows it just further defines some of the great work that is available on the website, and very specific topics. Last year, we created a webinar on traditional food practices for Native American elder care, and it's a great webinar. I mean, it's a great video. You can watch it, and it received an award because it was such quality. And so I really would encourage you to get on and watch that video of this tremendous woman who's doing such good work around traditional food practices. And so, there's also other information and other, examples and reports that you can see to help you as you're thinking and planning. If you're in the beginning stages of your roadmap steps, it really, so once you've decided and you've got some goals and objectives, these examples can really help you really think about all of the wonderful opportunities that are out there for you. The next slide talks about dementia, and you're able to find a report on Alzheimer's and dementia in Indian country, to find some resources on the topic, and other very important information, and plus the links to recordings of relevant LTSS webinars. This is certainly an area that all of us are trying to expand and to get more information out. And we have heard you all say that this is an area that you would like to have some focus on. The next slide gives a few more of those resources, and you can, on the site, those are the reports, the assessment tools, and the webinars are available. When we were, like I said, when we were talking about this earlier, before the webinar started, I asked if the link was on there, because it didn't look like there were live links on there. And while they're not live links, all of this information is readily accessible to you on the website. So the next slide goes into the same, uses the same kind of format, only the focus is on hospice and palliative care. So there's report, there's a lit review, a literature review. A literature review is a document that will help you, that identifies all of the different reports or documents or tools, webinars that are available for hospice in Indian country. There are 4 program profiles, and once again, that you can reach out and really work with others that have done this work. There's a webinar, an infographic, a fact sheet, and a video. So once again, just a wide range of resources that really is such a key part of what we're hoping to get across in this webinar today, that it has just lots and lots of great information on many, many topics that are needed in LTSS. The next slide shows you once again, the link, how you can access it. We really encourage you to just kind of tour the website and see all that's on there. Also, you can learn basics about LTSS. You can find important information on LTSS. And when you're ready, you can really begin to plan what services you're thinking about for your community. With that, I think that we're available, or I can answer any questions. Sherry, are you ready there to help with any questions that may have come?
Yes, thank you, Anna. That was a wonderful presentation. We are at the section now for questions and answers. I haven't gotten any in the chat box, so this is your time now to go ahead and submit any questions. We're here to answer them and assist you in any way. I will give everybody just a minute or so and open it up for questions at this time. This was really good information, Anna. Thank you so much. And we do encourage everyone to get out on the website, explore that. If you have questions about navigating through the website, we're more than happy to help with that as well.
Yeah, when I was asked to present this workshop or this webinar, I got it just gave me the chance to go through the website, and I was able to just find, one site takes you to the next, and to have so much Indigenous information in one site is so valuable. I would encourage you, as you're thinking about it, you might even refer your state programs to it so that they can also see some of the great information, and they can think about how to be inclusive of Indian people in the services that they provide.
We haven't gotten any questions, but you can ask questions in the Q&A box. You can raise your hand. We will definitely take all questions and get them answered. Cindy Cook, thank you so much for the compliment. She said, thanks for presenting this, and she loved the blessing at the beginning. And Gene is a wonderful, wonderful man, and those are always great openings. So I appreciate that comment.
And I just would, I just think that we as Indian people start in a good way. And, the best way to learn to do that is to do it. It's one thing to say it, it's another to practice it. And, I always encourage us to take time to do that, and know that we're honoring who we are as tribal people, and we're honoring our ancestors, and we're teaching our future generations about how important it is to be in the moment and to be thankful for who we are. And I know sometimes people might get that confused with it being a prayer or religious affiliated, and it's really not. It's a way that which people can center themselves and be ready to accept the information that is going to be presented to them.
Okay, we did just get a question about the website and if it could be put in the chat. I did place that in the chat. And also the URL, thank you, Christina, for the TA Center has been placed in there. Again, I'll just give everybody just a couple more, just a little bit more time here for some questions if you have any. All right, well, there is no more questions coming in. I'm going to give you one more second here, but otherwise, I would like to thank Anna Whiting Sorrell for joining us today and helping us better understand what CMS's LTSS TA Center has to offer. In closing, I would like to remind everyone that today's webinar was recorded and that the audio and presentation slides will be made available online at cms.gov. Thank you again for joining today's webinar. Our session is now concluded. And have a
Thank you,
wonderful day.
everybody. Thank you. Have a great day.